The statements offered in this series are never made without the strictest and fullest proof, confirmation, and corroboration in the utterances of Jewish leaders. This is one of the strange features of the multitude of Jewish attacks on this series. They are attacking what they themselves stand for, and their only reason for the attack must be their belief that this investigation has not been able to penetrate through to that which has been kept hidden from the world. The most persistent denials have been offered to the statement that Bolshevism everywhere in Russia or the United States is Jewish. In these denials, we have perhaps one of the most brazen examples of the double intent referred to above. The denial of the Jewish character of Bolshevism is made to the Gentile, but in the confidence and secrecy of Jewish communication, or buried in the Yiddish dialect, or obscurely hidden in the Jewish national press, we find the proud assertion made to their own people that Bolshevism is Jewish. Jewish propaganda has only two straws to grasp in the terrible tale of murder, immorality, robbery, enforced starvation, and hideous humanism, which make the present Russian situation impossible to describe and all but impossible to comprehend. One of these straws is that Kerensky, the man who eased in the opening wedge of Bolshevism, is not a Jew. Indeed, one of the strongest indications that Bolshevism is Jewish is that the Jewish press emphasizes so fiercely the alleged gentilism of at least two of the revolutionary notables. It may be cruel to deny them two among hundreds, but merely saying so cannot change Kerensky's nationality. His name is Adler. His father was a Jew and his mother a Jewess. Adler, the father, died, and the mother married a Russian named Kerensky, whose name the young child took. Among the radicals who employed him as a lawyer, among the forces that put him forward to drive the first nail into Russia's cross, among the soldiers who fought with him, his Jewish descent and character have never been doubted. Well, but there is Lenin, our Jewish publicists say. Lenin, the head of it all, the brains of it all, and Lenin is a Gentile. We've got you there. Lenin is a Gentile. Perhaps he is, but why do his children speak Yiddish? Why are his proclamations put forth in Yiddish? Why did he abolish the Christian Sunday and establish by law the Jewish Saturday Sabbath? The explanation of all this may be that he married a Jewess. The fact is that he did. But another explanation may be that he himself is a Jew. Certainly he is not the Russian nobleman he has always claimed to be. The statements he has made about his identity thus far have been lies. The claim that he is a Gentile may be unfounded too. No one has ever doubted Trotsky's nationality. He is a Jew. His name is Bronstein. Recently, the Gentiles were told that Trotsky had said he wasn't much of anything. In religion, that may be. But still, he must be something. Else why are the Russian Christian churches turned into stables, slaughterhouses, and dancing halls, while the Jewish synagogues remain untouched? And why are Christian priests and ministers made to work on roads, while Jewish rabbis are left their clerical privileges? Trotsky may not be much of anything in religion, but he is a Jew nevertheless. This is not mere Gentile insistence that he shall be considered a Jew, whether or no. It is straight Jewish teaching that he is. In a future discussion on religion or race, we shall show that even without religion, Trotsky is and is considered by all Jewish authorities to be a Jew. An apology must be made here for repeating well-known facts. Yet so many people are not even now aware of the true meaning of Bolshevism that at the risk of monotony, we shall cite a few of the salient facts. The purpose, however, is not alone to explain Russia, but to throw a warning light on conditions in the United States. The Bolshevik government, as it stood late this summer when the latest report was smuggled through to certain authorities, shows up the Jewish domination of the whole affair. It has changed very slightly since the beginning. We give only a few items to indicate the proportion. It must not be supposed that the non-Jewish members of the government are Russian. Very few Russians have anything to say about their own country these days. The so-called dictatorship of the proletariat, in which the proletariat has nothing whatever to say, is Russian only in the sense that it is set up in Russia. It is not Russian in that it springs from or includes the Russian people. It is the international program of the protocols, which might be put over by a minority in any country and which is being given a dress rehearsal in Russia. Please see the graph on screen. These are enlightening figures. The reader will note that the Jewish percentage is high at all times, never lower than 76% in any case. Curiously enough, the lowest percentage of Jews is found in the Commissariat of War. But in those committees which deal most closely with the mass of the people, as well as in the committees of defense and propaganda, Jews fill literally all the places. Remember what the protocols say about press control? Remember what Baron Montefiore said about it? And then look at the government journalists. That committee comprises 41 men, and the 41 are Jews. Only Jewish pens are trusted with Bolshevist propaganda. And then the so-called Red Cross delegates, which are merely Red Revolutionary delegates to the cities named. Of the 8, there are 8 Jews. The Commissariat of Social Assistance, upon whose word the life and privilege of tens of thousands hang, there are 6 members, and the 6 are Jews, and so on through the list. Out of the 53 members of the Commissariat of Public Instruction, 11 are noted as non-Jews. But what kind of non-Jews is not stated. They may be non-Jews like Lenin, whose children speak the Yiddish as their native tongue. Whatever they are, there is a sidelight upon their attitude in the fact that the Bolsheviki immediately took over all the Hebrew schools and continued them as they were, and laid down a rule that the ancient Hebrew language should be taught in them. The ancient Hebrew language is the vehicle of the deeper secrets of the world program. And for the Gentile Russian children, why, said these gentle Jewish educators, we will teach them sex knowledge. We will brush out of their minds the cobwebs. They must learn the truth about things, with consequences that are too pitiable to narrate. But this can be said, unquestionably, there were deaths among innocent Jews when Hungary wrested itself free from the red Bolshevism of Bela Kun or Cohen. The Jews may well call it the White Terror that followed their failure to reenact the tragedy of Russia in Hungary. But there are mountains of evidence to show that nothing had so potent an effect in producing the bloodshed of the White Terror as the outraged minds of parents whose children had been compulsorily drawn through sloughs of filth during the short time the Jewish Bolsheviki had charge of the schools. American Jews do not like to hear this. Their shrinking from it would be greatly to their honor did they not immediately return to the defense of the people who do these things. It is well enough known that the chastity of Christians is not so highly regarded by the Orthodox male Jew as is the chastity of his own people, but it would be pleasant to be certain that all of them condemn what went on in Russia and Hungary in the matter of education. However, as most of the influences which destroy Gentile youth today in America are in the hands of the Jews, and as it is plainly stated in the protocols that one of the lines of campaign is to corrupt the youth of the Gentiles, the situation is one that calls for something more than mere hard feelings and angry denials whenever these facts are referred to. It is not the economic experiment, so-called, that one objects to in Russia. It is not the fallacies, the sad delusion of the people. No, it is the downright dirty immorality, the brutish nastiness of it all, and the line which the immorality and nastiness draws between Jew and Gentile. The horrible cruelty involved we will not deal with, leaving it merely with the explanation which has found utterance in the Jewish press, that it may be that the Jew in Russia is taking an unconscious revenge for his centuries of suffering. But, asks some reader, how may we know that all this is true? Bearing in mind that we are speaking of Russia, not for the interest of the Russian situation at all, but to indicate the international character of those who are responsible for conditions there, and to identify them for the protection of the United States, we shall look at the evidence. There is, of course, the evidence brought to light by our own United States Senate and printed in a report of the Committee on the Judiciary. We do not wish to spend much time on this because we prefer in these articles to use Jewish testimony instead of Gentile, but we shall pause long enough to show the nature of the testimony brought out by our own government. Dr. George A. Simons, a clergyman in charge of an American congregation in Petrograd at the time the Bolshevik terror broke out, was a witness. Parts of his testimony are given here. There were hundreds of agitators who followed in the trail of Trotsky-Bronstein, these men having come over from the Lower East Side of New York. A number of us were impressed by the strange Yiddish element in this thing right from the start, and it soon became evident that more than half the agitators in the so-called Bolshevik movement were Yiddish. Senator Nelson, Hebrews, Dr. Simons. They were Hebrews, apostate Jews. I do not want to say anything against the Jews as such. I am not in sympathy with the anti-Semitic movement, never have been, and do not ever expect to be. But I have a firm conviction that this thing is Yiddish, and that one of its bases is found in the east side of New York. Senator Nelson, Trotsky came over from New York during that summer, did he not? Dr. Simons, he did. Later, Dr. Simons said, in December 1918, under the presidency of a man known as Apfelbaum, out of 388 members, only 16 happened to be real Russians, and all the rest Jews, with the exception possibly of one man who is a Negro from America, who calls himself Professor Gordon, and 265 of this northern commune government that is sitting in the old Smolny Institute came from the lower east side of New York, 265 of them. I might mention this, that when the Bolsheviki came into power all over Petrograd, we at once had a predominance of Yiddish proclamations, big posters, and everything in Yiddish. It became very evident that now that was to be one of the great languages of Russia, and the real Russians, of course, did not take very kindly to it. William Chapin Huntington, who was commercial attaché of the United States Embassy at Petrograd, testified, "The leaders of the movement, I should say, are about 2/3 Russian Jews. The Bolsheviks are internationalists, and they were not interested in the particular national ideals of Russia." William W. Welch, an employee of the National City Bank, New York, testified, "In Russia, it is well known that 3/4 of the Bolshevik leaders are Jewish. There were some, not many, but there were some real Russians. And what I mean by real Russians is Russian-born and not Russian Jews." Roger E. Simmons, trade commissioner connected with the United States Department of Commerce, also testified. An important anonymous witness, whom the committee permitted to withhold his name, told the same things. The British White Book, Russia, Number 1, a collection of reports on Bolshevism in Russia, presented to Parliament by command of His Majesty, April 1919, contains masses of the same testimony from many sources, all of them eyewitnesses. In that very highly respected magazine, Asia, for February-March 1920, is an article which contains, among other important ones, these statements. In all the Bolshevist institutions, the heads are Jews. The assistant commissar for elementary education, Grunberg, can hardly speak Russian. The Jews are successful in everything and obtain their ends. They know how to command and get complete submission, but they are proud and contemptuous toward everyone, which strongly excites the people against them. At the present time, there is a great national religious fervor among the Jews. They believe that the promised time of the rule of God's elect on earth is coming. They have connected Judaism with a universal revolution. They see in the spread of revolution the fulfilling of the scriptures. Though I make an end of all the nations whither I have scattered thee, yet will I not make an end of thee. Now, if Gentile proof were wanted, the files of the Dearborn Independent for a whole year would not begin to contain it. But Jewish proof is better. There has been a strange vacillation in Jewish opinion concerning Bolshevism. At first, it was hailed with delight. There was no concealment whatever in the early days of the new regime as to the part Jewry had in it. Public meetings, interviews, special articles poured forth in which very valuable elements of truth were mingled. There was no attempt at concealment of names. The horror of the thing began to take hold upon the world, and for just a breathing space, Jewish opinion fell silent. There was a spasmodic denial or two, then a new burst of glorification. The glorification continues within Judaism itself, but it now carries on the Gentile side of its face a very sad expression labeled persecution. We have lived to see the day when to denounce Bolshevism is to persecute the Jews. In the American Hebrew for September 10th, 1920, an article appears which not only acknowledges and explains the part which the Jew plays in the present unrest and upheaval, but justifies it, and justifies it, curiously enough, by the Sermon on the Mount. The writer says that the Jew evolved organized capitalism with its working instrumentality, the banking system. This is very refreshing in view of the numerous Jewish denials of this economic fact. One of the impressive phenomena of the impressive time is the revolt of the Jew against the Frankenstein that his own mind conceived and his own hand-fashioned asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. If this is true, why is Jewish organized capital with its working instrumentality, the banking system, supporting the revolt? That achievement referring to the Russian overthrow, destined to figure in history as the overshadowing result of the World War, was largely the outcome of Jewish thinking, of Jewish discontent, of Jewish effort to reconstruct. This rapid emergence of the Russian Revolution from the destructive phase and its entrance into the constructive phase is a conspicuous expression of the constructive genius of Jewish discontent. This, of course, requires proof that the constructive phase has appeared. The implication here is sheer propaganda. The protocols, however, have a reconstructive program. We have not reached it as yet in this series of articles, but it is clearly outlined in the protocols. Destroy the Gentile society and then reconstruct it according to our plans. Now read carefully. What Jewish idealism and Jewish discontent have so powerfully contributed to accomplish in Russia, the same historic qualities of the Jewish mind and heart are tending to promote in other countries. Read that again. What Jewish idealism and Jewish discontent have so powerfully contributed to accomplish in Russia? Just what was that? And just how did it powerfully contribute? And why are Jewish idealism and Jewish discontent always linked together? If you read the protocols, it is all very clear. Jewish idealism is the destruction of Gentile society and the erection of Jewish society. Was it not so in Russia? Yiddish proclamations on the walls, the ancient Hebrew in the schools, Saturday substituted for Sunday, and the rabbis respected while the priests were put to work on the roads, all powerfully contributed to by murder, rapine, theft, and starvation. Our author is more candid than he realizes. He calls this linked idealism and discontent the historic qualities of the Jewish mind. The Dearborn Independent is indebted to him for this clear confirmation of what it has been saying for some time, but even that is not all. These same historic qualities of the Jewish mind, which contributed so powerfully to accomplish in Russia the Red Terror still existing there, are declared by this author to be tending to promote the same sort of thing in other countries. He says so in so many words, tending to promote in other countries. But we knew that. The only difference is that when Gentiles said it, they were overwhelmed with the wildest abuse. But now a pro-Jewish writer says it in a leading Jewish publication, and he says it apologetically. Listen to him. It was natural that discontent in other parts of the world should find expression in overemphasis of issues and overstatement of aims. What discontent? Jewish discontent, of course. Discontent with what? With any form of Gentile rule. And how did it find expression? In overemphasis of issues and overstatement of aims. What were these issues and aims? To bring the Bolshevik Revolution to the United States? No, they did not overstate their aims. They exactly stated them. They simply selected the wrong country, that's all. There are Russian Bolshevists in this country now, hawking about the streets of New York the gold cigarette cases which they stole from Russian families, and the family jewels, the wedding and birthday rings, which they filched from Russian women. Bolshevism never got further than the pawn shop and burglar's fence idea. The proof of this traffic in stolen property is going to drive some people into hiding before long. It will be a long, long time before America will be taking orders in Yiddish, or American women will be giving up their jewels to the chosen race. However, that happens to be only the most recent acknowledgement that has come to hand. It is significant for its confession that Jewish discontent was tending to promote in other countries what it has so powerfully contributed to accomplish in Russia. And with such a link between the American Hebrew, Russian Bolshevism, and the protocols, there are still Jewish publicists with the crust to say that only crazy people could see the connection. Only blind people will not see it. But that is only a minor connection. This series of articles does not rest on anything so accidental as the Jewish New Year's apology for Bolshevism in the Great Hebrew Weekly of the United States. The Dearborn Independent issue of the 25th of September, 1920. The International Jew by Henry Ford, Volume 1, Chapter 20, Jewish Testimony in Favor of Bolshevism. The American people will answer that question, and their answer will be against the disruptive genius of dissatisfied Jews. It is very well known that what Jewish idealism and Jewish discontent have so powerfully contributed to accomplish in Russia is also being attempted in the United States. Why did not the writer in the American Hebrew say the United States, instead of saying the same historic qualities of the Jewish mind and heart are tending to promote in other countries? Jewish idealism and Jewish discontent are not directed against capital. Capital is enlisted in their service. The only governmental order the Jewish effort is directed against is Gentile governmental order, and the only capital it attacks is Gentile capital. Lord Eustace Percy, who, if one may judge by the full and appreciative quotations of his words in the Jewish press, has the sanction of thinkers among the Jews, settles the first point. Discussing the Jewish tendency to revolutionary movements, he says, "In Eastern Europe, Bolshevism and Zionism often seem to grow side by side, just as Jewish influence molded Republican and socialist thought throughout the 19th century down to the Young Turk Revolution in Constantinople hardly more than a decade ago. Not because the Jew cares for the positive side of radical philosophy, not because he desires to be a partaker in Gentile nationalism or Gentile democracy, but because no existing Gentile system of government is ever anything but distasteful to him." And that analysis is absolutely true. In Russia, the excuse was the Tsar. In Germany, the Kaiser. In England, it is the Irish question. In the numerous South American revolutions where the Jews always had a ruling hand, no particular reason was thought necessary to be given. In the United States, it is the capitalistic class, but always and everywhere it is, by the confession of their own spokesman, a distaste for any form whatsoever of Gentile government. The Jew believes that the world is his by right. He wants to collect his own, and the speediest way of doing so is the destruction of order by revolution, a destruction which is made possible by a long and clever campaign of loose and destructive ideas. As to the second point, every reader can verify the fact from his own experience. Let him recall to his mind the capitalists who have been held up to public scorn in the Jew-controlled press of the United States, and whom does he find them to be? Whose forms have you seen caricatured with the dollar mark in Hearst's papers? Are they Seligman, Kahn, Warburg, Schiff, Kuhn, Loeb and Company, or any of the others? No, these are Jewish bankers. The attack is never made on them. The names made most familiar to you by newspaper denunciation are the names of Gentile industrial and banking leaders, and Gentile leaders only, the principal ones being Morgan and Rockefeller. It is a well-known fact that during the French Commune, when men of wealth suffered severe losses in property, the Jewish Rothschilds were not injured to the extent of one pennyworth. It is also a well-known fact, capable of proof satisfactory to any ordinary mind, that the connections between Jewish financiers and the more dangerous revolutionary elements here in the United States are such that it is most unlikely that the former stand to lose anything in any event. Under cover of the disorder in Russia at the present time, Jewish financiers are taking advantage of the stress of the people to gain control of all the strategic natural resources and municipal property by methods which they fully expect to be legalized by Jewish courts when the present Bolshevik regime announces that it will give way to a modified communism. The world hasn't seen the end of Bolshevism yet. Like the World War, Bolshevism cannot be interpreted until it is seen who profits most by it, and the profiteering is in full sway now. The enemy is Gentile capital, not any other, and all the wealth of the world is in our hands, is the unspoken slogan of every Jewish outbreak in the world today. The quotation at the head, if this article represents the position which the Jews are now ready to take with reference to the Russian Revolution. They have always been charged with responsibility for what has occurred in that unhappy country, but at first their spokesman denied it. The denials were most indignant and were usually accompanied by the typical plaint that the charge was persecution. But the facts have been so overwhelming and the government investigations have been so revealing that denials have been abandoned. For a while, an attempt was made to distract attention from Russia by a tremendously powerful propaganda concerning the Jews in Poland. There are many indications that the Polish propaganda was undertaken as a cover for the immense immigration of Jews into the United States. It may be that some of our readers do not know it, but an endless stream of the most undesirable immigrants pours daily into the United States, tens of thousands of the same people whose presence has been the problem and menace of the governments of Europe. Well, the Polish propaganda and the immigration movement are sailing along smoothly, and the United States government is assured by the Jewish ring at Washington that everything is quiet along the Potomac. It is quiet there, quiet as the Jewish ring could wish. But still, the Russian fact persists in calling for explanation. And here is the explanation. The Jews created capitalism, we are told, but capitalism has proved itself ill-behaved. So now the Jewish creators are going to destroy their creation. They have done so in Russia. And now, will the American people be good and let their Jewish benefactors do the same in America? That is the new explanation, and typically Jewish again. It is coupled with a proposal for the United States and a threat. If American refuses this particular service of the Jew, we put him in a position of an irreconcilable enemy. See quotation at the head of this article. But the Jews have not destroyed capitalism in Russia. When Lenin and Trotsky make their farewell bow and retire under the protective influence of the Jewish capitalists of the world, it will be seen that only Gentile or Russian capital has been destroyed and that Jewish capital has been enthroned. What is the record? Documents printed by the United States government contain this letter. Please note the date, the Jewish banker, and the Jewish names. Stockholm, September 21st, 1917, to Mr. Raphael Skolin. Dear comrade, the banking house, Monsieur Warburg, opened an account for the enterprise of Comrade Trotsky upon receipt of a telegram from the chairman of the Rhine-Westphalian Syndicate. A lawyer, probably Mr. Kestroff, obtained ammunition and organized the transportation of same, together with that of the money *****, to whom the sum demanded by Comrade Trotsky is to be handed. Fraternal greetings, Furstenberg. Long before that, an American Jewish financier was supplying the funds which carried revolutionary propaganda to thousands of Russian prisoners of war in Japanese camps. It is sometimes said, by way of explaining the Bolshevik movement, that it was financed from Germany, a fact which was seized upon to supply war propaganda. It is true that part of the money came from Germany. It is true that part of the money came from the United States. It is the whole truth that Jewish finance in all the countries was interested in Bolshevism as an all-Jewish investment. For the whole period of the war, the Jewish World Program was cloaked under this or that national name, the blame being laid on the Germans by the Allies and on the Allies by the Germans, and the people kept in ignorance of who the real personages were. It was stated by a French official that $2 million of money was contributed by one Jewish banker alone. When Trotsky left the United States to fulfill his appointed task, he was released from arrest at Halifax upon request of the United States, and everyone knows who constituted the war government of the United States. The conclusion, when all the facts are considered, is irresistible, that the Bolshevik Revolution was a carefully groomed investment on the part of international Jewish finance. It is easy to understand, then, why the same forces would like to introduce it to the United States. The real struggle in this country is not between labor and capital. The real struggle is between Jewish capital and Gentile capital, with the IWW leaders, the socialist leaders, the red leaders, and the labor leaders almost a unit on the side of the Jewish capitalist. Again, recall which financiers these men most attacked. You cannot recall a single Jewish name. The main purpose in these two articles, however, is to introduce the Jewish testimony which exists as to the Jewish nature of Bolshevism. The Jewish Chronicle of London said in 1919, "There is much in the fact of Bolshevism itself, in the fact that so many Jews are Bolsheviks, in the fact that the ideals of Bolshevism at many points are consonant with the finest ideals of Judaism." In the same paper of 1920 is a report of an address made by Israel Zangwill, a noted Jewish writer, in which he pronounced glowing praise on the race which has produced a Beaconsfield, a Reading, a Montague, a Klotz, a Kurt Eisner, a Trotsky. Mr. Zangwill, in his swelling Semitic enthusiasm, embraced the Jews in the British government in the same category with the Jews of the Hungarian and Russian Bolshevik governments. What is the difference? They are all Jewish and all of equal honor and usefulness to the race. Rabbi J.L. Magnus, in an address at New York in 1919, is reported to have said, "When the Jew gives his thought, his devotion to the cause of the workers and of the dispossessed, of the disinherited of the world, the radical quality within him goes to the roots of things. And in Germany, he becomes a Marx and a Lassalle, a Haas and an Edward Bernstein. In Austria, he becomes a Victor Adler and a Friedrich Adler. In Russia, a Trotsky." Just take for a moment the present situation in Russia and in Germany. The revolution set creative forces free, and see what a large company of Jews was available for immediate service. Socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviki and Bolsheviki, majority and minority socialists, whatever they be called. Jews are to be found among the trusted leaders and the routine workers of all these revolutionary parties. "See," says the rabbi, "what a large company of Jews are available for immediate service." One ought to see where he points. There are as many Jewish members of revolutionary societies in the United States as there were in Russia, and here as there they are available for immediate service. Bernard Lazar, a Jewish writer who has published a work on anti-Semitism, says, "The Jew, therefore, does take a part in revolutions, and he participates in them insofar as he is a Jew, or more correctly, insofar as he remains a Jew." He says also, "The Jewish spirit is essentially a revolutionary spirit, and consciously or otherwise, the Jew is a revolutionist. There is hardly any country in the world except the United States where denials of this could be made in such a way as to require proof. In every other country, the fact is known. Here we have been under such a fear of mentioning the word Jew or anything pertaining to it that the commonest facts have been kept from us, facts which even a superficial knowledge of Jewish writing would have given us. It was almost a pathetic spectacle to see American audiences go to lectures about the Russian situation and come away from the hall confused and perplexed because the Russian situation is so un-Russian. All because no lecturer thought it politic to mention Jew in the United States. For as someday we shall see, the Jew has contrived to gain control of the platform too. Not only do the literary lights of Jewry acknowledge the Jew's propensity to revolution generally and his responsibility for the Russian situation particularly, but the lower lights also have a very clear idea about it. The Jew in the midst of the revolution is conscious that somehow he is advancing the cause of Israel. He may be a bad Jew in the synagogue sense, but he is enough of a Jew to be willing to do anything that would advance the prestige of Israel. Race is stronger than religion in Jewry. The Russian paper On to Moscow in September 1919 said, "It should not be forgotten that the Jewish people who for centuries were oppressed by kings and czars are the real proletariat, the real internationale, which has no country." Mr. Cohen, in the newspaper Communist in April 1919 said, "Without exaggeration, it may be said that the great Russian social revolution was indeed accomplished by the hands of the Jews. Would the dark, oppressed masses of the Russian workmen and peasants have been able to throw off the yoke of the bourgeoisie by themselves? No, it was precisely the Jews who led the Russian proletariat to the dawn of the Internationale, and not only have led, but are also now leading the Soviet cause, which remains in their safe hands. We may be quiet, as long as the chief command of the Red Army is in the hands of Comrade Leon Trotsky. It is true that there are no Jews in the ranks of the Red Army as far as privates are concerned, but in the committees and Soviet organizations, as commissars, the Jews are gallantly leading the masses of the Russian proletariat to victory. It is not without reason that during the elections to all Soviet institutions, the Jews are winning by an overwhelming majority. The symbol of Jewry, which for centuries has struggled against capitalism, has become also the symbol of the Russian proletariat, which can be seen even in the adoption of the red five-pointed star, which in former times, as it is well known, was the symbol of Zionism and Jewry. With this sign comes victory. With this sign comes the death of the parasites of the bourgeoisie. Jewish tears will come out of them in sweat of drops of blood. This confession, or rather boast, is remarkable for its completeness. The Jews, says Mr. Cohan, are in control of the Russian masses. The Russian masses who have never risen at all, who only know that a minority like the Tsar's minority is in control at the seat of government. The Jews are not in the Red Army, Mr. Cohen informs us. That is, in the ranks where the actual fighting is done, and this is strictly in line with the protocols. The strategy of the world program is to set Gentiles to kill Gentiles. This was the Jewish boast during the various French social disasters, that so many Frenchmen had been set killing each other. In the World War just past, there were as many Gentiles killed by Gentiles as there are Jews in the world. It was a great victory for Israel. Jewish tears will come out of them in sweat of drops of blood. But the Jews are in the places of control and safety, says Mr. Cohan, and he is absolutely right about it. The wonder is that he was so honest as to say it. As to the elections so-called at which the Jews are so unanimously chosen, the literature of Bolshevism is very explicit. Those who voted against the Jewish candidates were adjudged enemies of the revolution and executed. It did not require many executions at a voting place to make all the elections unanimous. Mr. Cohan is especially instructive on the significance of the Red Star, the five-pointed emblem of Bolshevism. The symbol of Jewry, he says, has become also the symbol of the Russian proletariat. The Star of David, the Jewish national emblem, is a six-pointed star formed by two triangles, one standing on its base, the other on its apex. Deprived of their baselines, these triangles approximate the familiar Masonic emblem of the square and compass. It is this Star of David, of which a Jewish observer in Palestine remarks that there are so few among the graves of the British soldiers who won Palestine in the recent war. Most of the signs are the familiar wooden cross. These crosses are now reported to be objectionable to the new rulers of Palestine because they are so plainly in view of the visitor who approaches the new Jewish university. As in Soviet Russia, so in Palestine, not many Jews laid down their lives for the cause. There were plenty of Gentiles for that purpose. As the Jew is a past master in the art of symbolism, it may not be without significance that the Bolshevik star has 1 point less than the Star of David. For there is still 1 point to be fulfilled in the world program as outlined in the protocols, and that is the enthronement of our leader. When he comes, the world autocrat for whom the whole program is framed, the sixth point may be added. The 5 points of the star now apparently assured are the purse, the press, the peerage, Palestine, and proletarianism. The sixth point will be the Prince of Israel. It is very hard to say, it is hard to believe, but Mr. Cohen has said it, and revolutions, especially since the French Revolution, confirm it, that with this sign comes the death of the parasites of the bourgeoisie. Jewish tears will come out of them in sweat of drops of blood. The bourgeoisie, as the protocols say, are always Gentile, the common counter-argument to the invincible fact of the Jewish character of the Russian Revolution, an argument which is destined to disappear now that Jewish acknowledgement is coming thick and fast, is that the Jews in Russia suffer too. How can we favor a movement which makes our own people suffer, is the argument put up to the Gentile. Well, the fact is this: they are favoring that movement. Today, this very moment, the Bolshevik government is receiving money from Jewish financiers in Europe, and if in Europe, then of course from the international Jewish bankers in America also. That is one fact. Another fact is this: the Jews of Russia are not suffering to anywhere near the extent we are told by the propagandists. It is now a fact admitted by Jews themselves that upon the first sweep of the Bolshevists across Poland, the Polish Jews were friendly with the invaders and helped them. The fact was explained by American Jews in this manner: since Bolshevism came to Russia, the condition of the Jews there has greatly improved. Therefore, the Polish Jews were friendly. And it is true, the condition of Russian Jews is good. One reason is they have Russia. Everything there belongs to them. The other reason is the Jews of Russia are the only ones receiving help there today. Did that second statement ever strike you as significant? Only the Jews of Russia have food and money sent to them. It is one form, of course, of the support which the Jewish world is giving Bolshevism. But if the suffering among the Jews is what the propagandists say it is, what must it be among the Russians? Yet no one is sending food or money to them. The probable truth of the whole situation is that Jewish Bolshevism is laying a tax on the world. Anytime it may be required, there is plenty of evidence as to the good condition of the Jews in Russia. They have all there is. Another source of confusion is revealed in the question, how can Jewish capitalists support Bolshevism when Bolshevism is against capitalism? Bolshevism, as before stated, is only against Gentile capitalism. Jewish financiers who remained in Russia are very useful to the Bolsheviki. Read this description by an eyewitness. A Jew is this commissary of the bank, very elegant, with a cravat of the latest style and a fancy waistcoat. A Jew is this district commissary, former stockbroker with a double bourgeois chin. Again, a Jew, this inspector of taxes. He understands perfectly how to squeeze the bourgeoisie. These agents of Jewry are still there. Other agents are among the Russians who fled, getting their lands away from them on mortgage loans. When the curtain lifts, most of the choice real estate will be found to have passed into Jewish control by perfectly legal means. That is one answer to the question, why the Jewish capitalists support Bolshevism. The Red Revolution is the greatest speculative event of human history. Besides, it is for the exaltation of Israel. It is a colossal revenge, which the Jews always take where they can for wrongs real or imaginary. Jewish capitalism knows exactly what it is doing. What are its gains? 1, it has taken a whole rich country without the cost of war. 2, it has demonstrated the necessity of gold. Jewish power rests on the fiction that gold is wealth. By the premeditated clumsiness of the Bolshevik monetary system, the unthinking world has been made to believe still more strongly that gold is necessary, and this belief gives Jewish capitalism another hold on the Gentile world. If the Bolshevists had been honest, they could have dealt Jewish capitalism its death blow. No, gold is still on the throne. Destroy the fiction that gold has value, and you leave the Jewish international financiers sitting forlorn on heaps of useless metal. 3, it has demonstrated its power to the world. Protocol 7 says, to demonstrate our enslavement of the Gentile governments of Europe, we will show our power to one of them by crimes of violence, that is, a reign of terror. Has Europe been sufficiently shown? Europe has and is afraid. That is a great gain for Jewish capitalists. 4, not the least of the gains is the field practice in the art of revolution which Russia has offered. Students of that Red School are coming back to the United States. The technique of revolution has been reduced to a science according to the details laid down in the protocols. To use Rabbi Magnus's words again, see what a large company of Jews was available for immediate service. The available company is now much larger. The Dearborn Independent, issue of the 2nd of October, 1920.